Okay, today I'm going to show you replacing the physical R and B buttons on an Xbox One controller. And first I'm going to show you the issue that I'm having with this controller. And I'm going to exemplify this using a free app on the Xbox App Store called Game Controller Tester. And we're going to hit the B button here to go back. And basically with this app, I've already got the controller all torn down here. But in this app you can hit a couple buttons. So first I gotta load it up, so it's gonna take a quick second. You gotta hit basically the start and back button simultaneously, and I don't have any buttons in the controller, so this can be a bit tricky here one-handed. Okay, so I have the app loaded here, ready to test the controller. So I'm going to show you the problem I'm exhibiting here. So this little graphic here shows you when you're pressing the different buttons. Over here, if you move around the analog stick, it shows you the position of the analog. And sorry, it's just hard to do one-handed with a controller. It's ready to fall apart any second. But what I want to show you is when you press the RB button. Let's see if you can see that. I don't know how well it comes out on camera. I can see it fine here. It's very subtle, but this gray button is turning yellow. And the RB button is working. However, it doesn't register every single click. And then the other side, the LB button, which is over here, is even worse. In fact, for the most part, it's not registering anything at all. So that's what I'm going to do. I need to replace basically both. And the actual RB buttons themselves, as you can see when you press this in, the plastic switch here depresses the button here on the front. I'll show this controller taken apart in just a moment and actually show you the process of removing these buttons and replacing these buttons. Okay, so this is the Xbox One controller completely torn down. This is half the main board, the other half is here with the analog sticks. They're basically it sandwiches together, the two boards do. And I have some videos on actually taking the Xbox One controller completely apart to replace the LED. So if you want to see how to take an Xbox One controller apart, you can refer to one of those videos. I'll link them in the description. But what we're going to concentrate on here today is removing the LB and RB buttons. So we do that on the opposite side. We can see here there's basically 4 pins, and I have a bunch of replacement buttons here. So we're going to want 2 of these, but you can see what they look like here. This is the actual button part, and this is the ground or the casing to help hold the button in place so it doesn't rip out. And so we're going to replace 2 of these. And let's get started here. So I have 2 types of soldering irons I'm going to use here. I have my standard soldering iron, and we're going to use this to apply some leaded solder on the points. And then I have the solder sucker iron here, and this is going to be to attempt to remove the solder from the bottom of the buttons. And sometimes that can be hit or miss. We'll see how that goes today. I also have a desoldering wick, which also helps to get the solder off as well. On the controllers, for the most part, I've done these analog sticks in the past, and these have 14 points as opposed to 4 points. And using the desoldering iron works pretty well with those. So let's see what goes on here. I'm going to try to keep myself out of the camera as much as possible. That can be a bit difficult though, because I need to get in close and see what I'm working on. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here is apply some of this flux here. Just helps the solder melt easier and more evenly. Okay. And then what we're going to do is add, I don't know exactly how far, I have these ridiculous glasses on as well, so I just need to get in just close enough to be in focus. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to apply a little bit of leaded solder here onto the points. You can actually see that all that well. Let's do it. These are pretty big points. So we should be able to get in there. Let me see what we're doing. So we're just going to go over each one of the points. And basically here we're doing the opposite of what we really want to do, which is we want to remove the solder. But here we are going in and adding more. But leaded solder generally melts at a lower temperature, so it makes it easier to remove. Okay, so we have all of our points here, and I'm not sure if this is heated up enough. It likely is. Let's just see if we can get some solder to melt on that. Might need to give this a little bit longer. You want this guy as hot as possible because you want it to instantly melt the solder and pull as much of the solder away as possible. Basically squeeze the bulb, and we're going to put it down on the point and then let go, and it will pull the solder in. But I don't think we're up to temp yet, so we will fast forward here or take a quick break. So let's try to remove some of the solder here. So we're going to basically place it over the point, and I usually like to, there's a hole here of course, so it goes over the point completely, and I usually push it to one side and then try to pull the solder away if things go well. So basically put it down, make sure that you see the solder melting, and then try to do it all in one shot. If you're fortunate enough, the first time you do it, because there's a lot of solder there, you can usually grab it all in one shot. And if we're fortunate enough for that to work, we should be able to do this in 4 shots. Let's see here. Okay, so we got, okay, so that's 1. And we just usually leave it on for a couple seconds here. Bulb actually hold off. So far so good. Just a little bit. Excess solder there, but let's try to see if we can get, one of those didn't come off. I can see it's still stuck there pretty good, which is usually fairly typical. It's almost always one point that gives you trouble. Okay, looks pretty good. I can still see that one point. So what I'm going to do on that one point where there's still some solder, it can be hard to remove a small amount of solder. It usually works better in a big bulb. So we're going to just try to redo this one more time. So we're going to add some solder back and pull it off again. Unfortunately, it did not. Clogged up here. Okay, well, see how we did here. Look up a little bit closer. This over to one side. So I'll take a quick look here at the points. And you can see, for the most part, you can actually see right to the other side. But even with that being the case, there's still quite a bit of solder hanging on there. So next what we're going to do is use the desoldering braid. So you can see there's still a connection there, still a connection there. The smaller connections do look pretty good. Yeah, looks like, yeah. So let's see if we can get the desoldering braid to pull out the rest there. So the bigger points are being the more stubborn ones. So let's just try to This one, this little point is some solder here too. One more. Okay, so let's see what we're doing here. All right, well, we're looking pretty good. You can tell these are still holding on a little bit. So now we're going to do the trick where I think, let's see which point's right. So that point's moving. So basically you can touch it with your finger and you can see if the solder joints themselves are now free. Still one more here. Let's see. Okay, it's looking pretty good there. Let's see if this one is completely free yet. Yep, that's free. Oh yeah, so that one looks pretty good. So this button is ready to basically pull right out of there. And as you can see, the main thing here is we don't want to damage any of these pads, and in this case we didn't. Yeah, this one is ready to go too, so we'll just pull this straight out. And if you did things right, it should pretty much fall straight out. So there you go. So a combination of using this and the desoldering braid to clean up afterwards is enough to get that all undone. So you can see here, all the pads look really nice and nothing left on the board. So next what we'll do is clean this up with a little bit of rubbing alcohol. So let me just look up close at this, but all I'm doing is basically taking some, I got some 91% rubbing alcohol here, and I put it on the end of a Q-tip, and we're just going to go over the area. For the most part, it's the flux that is all over the board, and is what we want to clean up. We'll probably apply a little more flux when we put everything back together, but okay, that looks really good. All right, so now we're going to, what is nice is our old ones here are, the buttons are actually black, whereas the new buttons are white, so it's very easy to know which is which. Well, of course, it does help if you put it back in on the right side. So you don't want to put it, you want obviously the soldering side to be the other side. Not do what I just did there. Go. Okay, there. So there are our new buttons in place. And so now all we have to do is solder this down, and which is actually the easy part. Removing solder is a lot harder than adding it. We don't want to add too much solder, but we definitely want to add enough to make sure that it holds. So we're going to take our regular soldering iron here, and we'll just apply some fresh solder. So there's not much of a secret to this other than you generally want to put the soldering iron on the pin and the pad that you're soldering, and then just push the solder into the iron, or to the pin and the iron. So that's what we'll just do here really quick. Okay, and we're going to go over each one really quick. Just make sure that's in okay. Yep, didn't move. Perfect. So we'll do 2 more pins on the other side. Same sort of idea here. Okay, so we don't want to add too much solder, but we also want to clean this up, so let's just go around each one. Just quickly touch to make sure it completely touches the base of the pad. I'm just going to go over each one here. Okay. Looking at the top side, everything looks fine. It actually looks pretty good. Okay, so that should do the trick there. See if I can get in that close-up view for you guys so you can actually see what it looks like. I won't know what this looks like until I'm actually editing in terms of how good of a view you get, but it's these 4 points here and then those 4 points there. Look back at the front side. You can see how it stands on the board. It's all flush. Okay, you can even get a close-up here of the LED. This is actually a red LED. All right, so I will I'll clean this board up a little more with some rubbing alcohol, but that should do it. We'll get this back together, and then I'll show you it being tested on the Xbox. Okay, so we got the controller all back together here, and we've got our little test app all up. As you can see, pressing the A button registers B, X, Y, but the most important thing here is the RB button. Well, and the LB. But you can see that's working fine. No matter how many times I click, it doesn't miss one. Switch over to the LB. And same thing there. So there you go. That's how you repair a non-functioning or basically an R and B button that's missing clicks or not working at all. This was the first time I've ever actually done this. The replacement buttons I got, again, were another eBay item. I think I paid about $6 for 10. I've got a bunch more here. And yeah, and it did the trick here. So it works out to a little over $1 in parts, and your controller's in working condition again. So I mostly make these videos just to show you what's possible in terms of fixing your controllers and fixing your system. And for the most part, you can fix just about any situation. Especially some of these smaller parts can be replaced really inexpensively. Anyways, that should do it for this video, and I'll see you in my next one.